Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Today we're checking out the latest audio interface from MOTU. Let's get started. Today we're looking at the brand new 828. Now you might say the 828's been around for quite a while. In fact, it was first introduced in 2001. But this is, I guess you could say, the fifth generation or the fifth iteration of the 828, and it's a completely new redesign. It's been totally modernized. We're going to dive in and take a deeper look. But before we do that, be sure to like, comment on this video, subscribe, and for complete information, head over to sweetwater.com or contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. Now let's take a look at the 828. So this new version of the 828 really brings the 828 into 2024. We've got a completely new design. You can see the faceplate is very streamlined. The controls, they just feel really luxurious. It's a solid all steel design. It's almost twice as deep as the previous 828s because there's a lot going on inside this box. It's ultra versatile and sounds fantastic. And we're going to take a little closer look so you can see all the things that the 828 could do for you both in your studio and on stage. The new 828 is class compliant with Mac, PC, and iOS devices, but there are dedicated MOTU drivers and they're going to give you even better performance. It connects to your computer using USB 3 up to 5 gigabits per second, or it's also backward compatible with USB 2.0, so it's super fast, and that helps with the latency of this device. It actually comes in as low as 2 milliseconds at 96 kilohertz, and that's as good as any of the fastest audio interfaces that are on the market. Basically, it's like no latency at all. Now, part of that is because we have so much onboard DSP inside the 828 itself. We're going to take a look at the QMix software a little bit later, but that DSP provides 24 channels of mixing with up to 8 stereo buses. It also provides onboard effects. We've got reverb, we've got 4-band EQ on the inputs, the outputs, we've got gating, we've got compression, so you can do a lot of processing right inside the 828 without taking any latency hit at all and without putting any pressure on your computer at all. A benefit of all that DSP and the QMix 5 software that runs in your computer is that you can actually remote control the 828 using Wi-Fi with an iOS device or with another computer that's on the same Wi-Fi network. It has network management built in. You can also password protect it if you like. So being able to access everything in the 828 remotely is a very cool feature. But let's get back to the hardware. We've got a total of 60 audio connections here, 28 inputs and 32 outputs, and we'll go through those in just a second. But all that is driven by the most cutting-edge, state-of-the-art converters that MOTU could find, and that's the ESS Sabre 32 Ultra converters, and that provides up to 125 dB of dynamic range on the DACs or on the outputs. Let's go through the I/O. Beginning on the front panel, we have 2 mic, line, and instrument preamp inputs. Those feed into channels 1 and 2. Now these are completely redesigned preamps. They offer up to 74 dB of gain, so they're going to work great with those high-demand dynamic microphones that we like to use for podcasts and things like the SM7 that require quite a bit of preamp juice to drive them. Of course, we have polarity invert, we've got a 20 dB pad, we've got 48-volt phantom power, and of course the specs for the preamp are simply outstanding. We've got minus 129 dB EIN or equivalent input noise, 114 dB THD plus noise. We've also got up to 118 dB of dynamic range on those preamps themselves. Very good specs. Now the other nice thing about those first 2 inputs is that on the back panel we have hardware inserts that come after the preamp. Now these are balanced TRS connections, so you have both balanced input and output for connecting to professional studio gear. And an added bonus is since that insert point comes after the preamp input, you can actually use those back panel insert points as additional line inputs, and they completely bypass the preamp when you do that. Next up on the front panel, we have 2 independent headphone outputs. You can see each one has its own volume control knob there, but you can also assign a completely independent QMix to each of those headphone outputs. That rounds out our I/O on the front panel. Of course, we have controls as well. We've got our preamp controls here. We've got our control room controls here. You can actually connect 2 sets of monitors, an A/B switch between those. We also have front panel control over monitor mute and monitor summing to mono. And there's a front panel talkback switch as well. Next to those front panel controls is this beautiful 3.9-inch TFT display. It's a 24-bit display, total full color RGB. It really looks gorgeous, and it tells you everything that's happening. You can see that we can adjust the headphone controls, we can adjust the preamp. You can see that read out on the front panel as well. We've got input metering, output metering. I'm playing back a session now, so we're seeing that. We can see monitor level control, as well as our sample rate, clocking, MIDI status, and so on. Now we can adjust the parameters from the front panel using this control. We scroll through and then you can select whatever parameter you want to adjust and work with it from there. So everything can be done right from the front panel. It's very simple to operate. That beautiful display makes it so nice to work with the 828. On the back panel, we begin with those 2 hardware inserts we talked about earlier. And next to this, we have 8 TRS balanced line level inputs. They're great for keyboards, for external processing gear, and so on. And you can actually boost the gain or level of those line inputs in 1 dB increments. We have stereo XLR outs. Those are our main outputs that feed our monitors. And again, we have control over those from the front panel. We're going to talk more about monitor control in just a minute. Next to those, we have 8 TRS balanced line level outputs. And again, we can trim the level of those in 1 dB increments. But an even nicer feature is they actually are DC coupled. And this means that we can use them for control voltage with synthesizers. Very cool to be able to control voltage from within your DAW just using your audio interface. We also have 8-at I/O on the back panel. We have 2 banks there providing up to 16 channels of optical input and output. The first bank can be switched to toslink to give you stereo SPDIF optical input and output. A nice feature with those optical inputs and outputs is we can actually use the 828 as an input and output expander with another interface or with a digital mixer, for example, using those 8-at connections. It's very easy to access that. We can either do it from the front panel or we can do it in the QMix 5 software. You simply turn on expander mode and it becomes an input and output expander that works great with your other gear. Rounding out the back panel, we have a coax digital output for SPDIF. We also have MIDI input and output, and we can also set this to be MIDI through, so you don't have to have a computer connection. You can plug into that MIDI input and route through to your other devices. The USB port, of course, connects to your host, whether Mac, PC, or iOS. And then we've got word clock input and output for synchronizing the digital data. One thing I skipped over was the foot switch connector. Now that can be used as a punch in, punch out, as you'd normally think of with your DAW, but it can also serve to send keystrokes, just like you're typing on a computer keyboard. You can have one keystroke sent when you push the button down and another sent when you let the button up. And you set that up using the QMix 5 software. There are so many additional features. Of course, we have loop back for recording the signal back into your computer if you're live streaming or podcasting. And we have a very cool feature if you're doing immersive or surround work. And that's that the front panel monitor control can actually control multiple outputs. So you can control the level of all your speakers simultaneously using the one front panel control. When you purchase an 828, it comes with MOTU's Digital Performer Lite, which is going to get you started right out of the box, and that includes more than 100 different instruments that you can load up for creating your music. It also comes with Ableton Live Lite and more than 6 gigabytes of content, samples, loops, and so on. Now at this point, I've mentioned the QMix 5 software a number of times. Let's take a look at it and what you can do from within that app. All right, so I've got Digital Performer 11 running here, but let's switch over to QMix. And this is our software app that allows us to access all the features inside the 828. This is our home screen. You can see we've got our microphone level controls here for our preamps, monitors, phones, etc. This is where we can set up our A/B monitoring. We can also control that from the front panel. We've got our talkback. You can choose a source for that. And also direct input monitoring. And this allows us to monitor through the 828 with virtually no latency. We've got device settings here, sample rate, and so on. We've got our input settings for those 8 additional line level inputs, as well as our optical inputs. And this is where we set up the foot switch as well. We have a down keystroke and an up keystroke. Similar, we can configure our outputs. We've got our main outs, we've got our headphone outputs, and we've got our line level outputs too. And those feed from our different mixes, which we'll take a look at in just one second. Here's where we assign our loop back, what's going out of SPDIF, our optical output banks, and so on. Now these next selections here along the left side of the window are different mixes that we can assign to the various outputs. So this is our main mix, and we can configure that for whatever monitoring situation we want to hear. And take a look up here at the top. If we click, we can open up our 4-band EQ for that input. We can also jump to the gate and the compressor. We've got mute, we've got level, solo, and so on. So it really is a comprehensive mixer right here inside the QMix 5 software. But again, that's running on the DSP that's inside the 828 hardware. It's not running in your computer. And we can set up similar independent mixes for headphones 1, headphones 2. We've got line mixes for those pairs of line level outputs. And we also have the onboard reverb that we can access. Now notice that over here on our outputs, if we go back to say the 7/8 mix, we also have EQ for that as well. If you're working in a network, you can do discovery here, and then we can log out of our device here. So the QMix 5 software makes it very easy to access all of the features that you need to control your 828. And again, you can do that remotely over Wi-Fi using a computer or an iOS device running the QMix 5 app. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the new MOTU 828. It's the 5th iteration of the 828 and by far the best they've ever made. The front panel just feels great with those controls, and it performs even better than it feels and it looks. The audio performance is stellar, and it offers so much flexibility. I mean, I don't know what you couldn't do with this interface, whether you're using it as an expander, whether you're using it as a standalone mixer being controlled by the QMix 5 software, or whether you're using it as an audio interface with your DAW, whether you're using it for control voltage to control analog synthesizers. There are so many different options with this interface. And again, keep in mind that it's a completely new design. Those preamps are fantastic. We have tons of gain, all those features. This really is a solid winner for MOTU. Be sure to check it out. If you have questions about the MOTU 828 or any of MOTU's products, be sure to jump over to sweetwater.com and check out the product pages there, or better yet, contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. They've got all the information for you. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater.